I spent over $200 on flowers last spring. My neighbor spent about $60. Her garden looked twice as good as mine by July. The difference had nothing to do with money or talent. She knew a handful of things about picking and placing flowers that took me years of dead plants to figure out on my own. In this video, I'm walking you through everything you need to know to start a flower garden that looks beautiful without breaking your back or your budget. We'll cover how to figure out what will grow where you live, which flowers give you the most color for the least work, how to understand your sun and soil without any fancy equipment, how to water the smart way so you're not dragging hoses around every evening, and how to space and plant so your garden fills in fast and keeps the weeds down. Plus, I've got a few tricks I've picked up over the decades that I've never heard anyone else talk about. The biggest reason new flower gardens fail has nothing to do with skill. It comes down to putting a plant somewhere it was never meant to grow. That's it. A shade-loving plant baking in afternoon sun. A tropical beauty trying to survive a Pennsylvania winter. A moisture-loving fern sitting in sandy soil that drains like a colander. Every time I see someone frustrated with their garden, 9 times out of 10, it traces back to this one mistake. So before you buy a single plant, you need to know a few things about your own yard. And the first one is your hardiness zone. Your USDA hardiness zone tells you one thing and one thing only: how cold it gets where you live in winter. You can find yours in about 10 seconds. Search USDA hardiness zone by zip code, type in your zip, and you'll get a number with a letter. I garden in zone 6B here in the northeast of Spain's equivalent climate, and that means my winters drop to somewhere around -5 to 0 degrees Fahrenheit on average. Each full number on the scale represents a 10-degree Fahrenheit difference, and each half step, the A versus the B, represents 5 degrees. So zone 7A is 10 degrees warmer in winter than zone 6A. Now here's where I want to save you some confusion. Your zone matters most when you're shopping online or asking for advice in gardening groups on Facebook. People will ask you right away, what zone are you in? And if you don't know, they can't help you. But if you're buying plants at your local garden center, those plants are almost always selected for your region already. The nursery down the road from me doesn't stock plants that can't survive our winters. They'd go out of business. So your zone is a filter, not a rule book. And I want to be clear about something. A plant being rated for your zone does not guarantee it will thrive in your specific garden. There are other pieces to this puzzle, and we'll get to those in a minute. Before we do, let's talk about the 2 main categories of flowers, because this is where a lot of people get tripped up by the names. Annual flowers are the ones you plant fresh every year. They grow, they bloom, they die, all in one season. Perennial flowers are the ones you plant once, and they come back year after year on their own. The names are a bit backwards if you think about it. Annual sounds like it should mean comes back annually, but it means the opposite. I spent my first couple of years confused by this, so don't feel bad if it catches you off guard. Each type has strengths that matter a lot when you're over 60 and want results without exhaustion. Annuals, things like zinnias, marigolds, cosmos, petunias, tend to bloom non-stop from late spring all the way until frost. You get months and months of continuous color. The trade-off is you have to replant them every year, which means buying new plants or starting seeds each spring. Perennials, coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, daylilies, hostas, come back on their own, so your work decreases over time. But most perennials bloom for a shorter window, maybe 4 to 8 weeks, and then they're done flowering for the season. What I've found works best in my own garden is a mix of both. I use perennials as the backbone. They fill in the structure, they come back reliably, and after a couple of years they need very little from me. Then I tuck annuals into the gaps for season-long color. This way I'm not replanting an entire bed every spring, which at my age is a big deal. My knees have opinions about that sort of thing, but I still get that riot of color from May through October, because the annuals carry the show between perennial bloom times. One thing that catches people off guard, a plant that's perennial in Florida might be annual where you live. Lantana is a good example. In zones 9 and 10, it comes back every year like clockwork. In my zone 6 garden, frost kills it dead every fall. So when a plant tag says perennial in zones 8 to 11 and you're in zone 6, treat it as an annual. You'll enjoy it for one season, and that's fine. Some of the prettiest flowers in my garden each summer are technically perennials that I grow as annuals because they can't handle our cold. Here's a tip I don't hear many people mention. Some annuals drop seeds at the end of the season that sprout on their own the following spring. Cosmos, zinnias, and marigolds do this for me regularly. I stopped buying Cosmos starts about 8 years ago because they reseed themselves every year in the same bed. It's free flowers. If you want this to happen, leave the spent flower heads on the plant at the end of fall instead of cutting them back. Let them dry and scatter their seeds naturally. By spring, you'll see tiny seedlings popping up right where the parent plant was. It won't happen with every annual, but when it does, it feels like a gift from the garden. Now let's talk about sun, because this is where I see the most expensive mistakes. Every flowering plant has a sun requirement, and there are 3 categories that matter. Full sun means at least 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. Part sun or part shade means somewhere between 3 and 6 hours. Full shade means fewer than 3 hours of direct sun. And I want to emphasize, these are hours of direct sunlight hitting the leaves, not ambient daylight. A spot can feel bright and open, but still be shaded by a tree canopy or a neighbor's house for most of the day. Before you plant anything, spend one day mapping the sun in your yard. Pick a sunny day, go outside every 2 hours starting around 8 in the morning, and note which areas are in sun and which are in shade at each check. By the end of the day, you'll have a clear picture. I keep a simple sketch of my yard, and I shade in the areas with a pencil at each time check. It takes maybe 5 minutes each time, and it's something you can do from a lawn chair with a cup of coffee if standing for long stretches is hard on you. I want to pause here because I'm curious about something. Where are you watching this from? And what's your biggest challenge with your flower garden? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. I love hearing from gardeners all over. One thing I wish someone had told me years ago: afternoon sun is much harsher than morning sun. A spot that gets 6 hours of gentle morning light is very different from a spot that gets 6 hours of blazing afternoon exposure. Both technically qualify as full sun, but many plants that are labeled part shade will tolerate that morning sunspot perfectly well while frying in the afternoon one. If you have a choice, and especially if you're gardening in zones 7 or higher, where summers get brutal, east-facing beds that catch morning sun and get afternoon shade can be a sweet spot for a much wider range of flowers than you'd expect. If you want to know more about creating a beautiful garden that practically takes care of itself, with gorgeous flowers, free plants, and so much less work, I wrote something just for you. It is called The Beautiful Low-Effort Garden, and it is everything I wish someone had told me decades ago when I started gardening. I put my heart into every page. Just point your phone camera at the QR code on the screen. I hope you got it. I truly think you are going to love it. And now, back to the video. After sun, the next piece is soil, and I know this is the part where people's eyes glaze over. Stay with me because this doesn't have to be complicated at all. You do not need to send your soil to a lab. You do not need to buy a test kit. You can learn what you need to know with your bare hands in about 2 minutes. Walk out to where you want to plant. Dig down about 6 inches with a trowel. Grab a handful of that soil and squeeze it in your fist. If it clumps into a tight, sticky ball that holds its shape, you've got clay-heavy soil. If it falls apart and feels gritty and won't hold together at all, you've got sandy soil. If it holds together loosely and crumbles when you poke it, you're somewhere in between, which is what most of us have. Neither type is bad. Clay soil holds water and nutrients well, but drains slowly. Sandy soil drains fast, but doesn't hold moisture or nutrients as long. Knowing which one you have tells you which flowers will be happiest there and how you might need to adjust your watering. Plants that hate wet roots, lavender, yarrow, black-eyed Susans, do well in sandy or well-drained soil. Plants that like consistent moisture, astilbe, ligularia, cardinal flower, do better in clay or heavier soil. Here's something I started doing about 15 years ago that made a noticeable difference in every bed I've planted since. Regardless of what type of soil I have, I mix in 2 to 3 inches of compost every time I prepare a new bed. Compost improves clay soil by opening up the structure so water can move through. It improves sandy soil by helping it hold onto moisture longer. It feeds the soil organisms that keep everything healthy underground. I buy bagged compost from the garden center when I need a lot. It runs maybe $4 to $6 a bag depending on where you shop. And I make my own from kitchen scraps and yard waste the rest of the time. If you do one thing for your soil, make it compost. It's the closest thing to a universal fix I've found in over 4 decades of gardening. So now you know your zone, you know which areas get sun and shade, you know what your soil is like, and you know whether you want annuals, perennials, or a mix. You're ready to pick your plants. And I want to share a method that has saved me more money and frustration than anything else. Before I go to the garden center, I browse plant websites online, not to buy, though you can, but to use their filters. Sites like Nature Hills Nursery and other big online nurseries let you filter by zone, sun requirement, soil type, bloom color, height, and more. I spend maybe 20 minutes narrowing down a list of plants that will work for my specific conditions. Then I write that list on a piece of paper and take it to my local garden center. This way I'm not wandering the aisles picking up whatever has a pretty flower on the tag and hoping for the best. I know before I walk in the door that everything on my list can handle my zone, my sun, and my soil. It's like going grocery shopping with a list instead of grabbing whatever looks good. Your wallet and your garden will thank you. Now let's talk about what keeps those plants alive after you get them in the ground. Starting with water. New plants need consistent watering while they're getting their roots established. For perennials and smaller plants, that means watering every day or every other day for the first 4 to 6 weeks. For larger shrubs, you might need to keep watering regularly for the whole first growing season. After that first establishment period, most perennials will need supplemental water only when rainfall drops off. A rain gauge is one of the best $2 tools you can own. Stick it in your garden bed and check it each week. Most flowering plants need about 1 inch of water per week. If you got an inch of rain, you don't need to water at all that week. If you got half an inch, you supplement with the other half. This takes the guessing out of it completely. For those of us who don't want to stand holding a hose, and I count myself in that group, a soaker hose laid through your bed is a huge help. You connect it to your spigot, turn it on low, and let it seep water directly into the soil around the roots. No spraying, no standing, no getting your foliage wet, which can lead to fungal problems. I run mine for about 20 to 30 minutes once or twice a week depending on rainfall, and that's usually enough. A 50-foot soaker hose costs around $10 to $15 and lasts several seasons. For anyone with back or joint issues, that's a meaningful quality of life improvement in the garden. Here's another tip that I rarely see mentioned. Water in the morning whenever you can. Watering in the evening leaves moisture sitting on leaves and soil overnight, which creates perfect conditions for fungal diseases like powdery mildew and black spot. Morning watering gives the foliage time to dry in the sun. If morning doesn't work for your schedule, late afternoon, around 4 or 5 o'clock, is the second best option. Midday watering wastes more water to evaporation, so I avoid that when I can. After water comes food, and this is simpler than people make it. New plants benefit from a gentle fertilizer mixed into the soil at planting time. I've had good luck with Espoma Biotone. It's an organic starter fertilizer that's mild enough not to burn tender new roots. After that, for perennials, I fertilize twice a year, once in early spring when new growth starts, and once again when they begin to bloom. That's it. I use a granular organic fertilizer like plant tone, sprinkle it around the base, and let the rain water it in. Annuals are heavier feeders because they're producing flowers non-stop for months. I give mine a liquid feed every 2 to 3 weeks through the growing season. If you're growing annuals in containers, and containers are wonderful for people who can't get down on the ground easily, feeding is even more important because the roots can't reach beyond the pot for nutrients. Container plants are completely dependent on you for food and water, so keep that in mind. One thing I want to mention that the typical beginner guide skips: deadheading. This means snipping off spent flowers before they go to seed. With annuals especially, deadheading tricks the plant into producing more blooms because it's trying to complete its reproductive cycle by making seeds. Every time you remove a faded flower, the plant puts out a new one to try again. I walk through my garden with a pair of small snips every few days in summer and pop off anything that's past its prime. It takes me 10 minutes, and it keeps the color going strong. For many perennials, deadheading extends the bloom window by a couple of extra weeks too. It's one of those small habits that makes a visible difference. Now let's get into spacing, because this is where I see new gardeners, and plenty of experienced ones, make costly mistakes. You buy a little plant in a 4-inch pot, and it's hard to believe it's going to get 3 feet wide. But many perennials will. Coneflowers, daylilies, Russian sage, they spread. If you plant them too close together, within 2 years you've got a tangled mess with poor air circulation, which invites disease. If you plant them too far apart, you've got bare soil between them, which invites weeds. Every plant tag tells you the mature spread. Read it. A plant that spreads to 24 inches should be planted with its center about 24 inches from the center of the next plant. You can cheat this slightly, going to about 18 inches, if you want the bed to fill in faster, knowing you'll need to divide and thin them in a couple of years. For shrubs and larger plants, follow the tag spacing more closely and add an extra foot or so between the plant and any structure, your house, a fence, a walkway. You want to be able to get behind the plant for maintenance, to reach a spigot, or to clean gutters without fighting through branches. I've learned the hard way to also check the mature height. I once planted a row of ornamental grasses right in front of a window, and by August they were 6 feet tall and I couldn't see out. Measure twice, plant once. That advice isn't only for carpenters. One original spacing trick I've used for years. When I lay out a new bed, I set the plants on top of the soil in their pots before I dig a single hole. I stand back, look at the arrangement, and adjust until I'm happy. Sometimes I grab a chair and look from the angle I'll see the bed most often. From the porch, from the kitchen window, from the driveway. This 5-minute step has saved me from digging plants back up and moving them more times than I can count. Moving a pot is easy. Moving a planted perennial is work. When you're ready to plant, wait until after your last frost date. You can find this by searching last frost date plus your zip code. The Farmer's Almanac has a good calculator for this. Your local extension office can tell you too. Once that date passes, I still wait another week or 10 days and watch the forecast. A surprise late frost can wipe out tender annuals overnight. I lost an entire flat of impatiens one year in early May because I got impatient. The irony of that name was not lost on me. Planting technique is straightforward. Dig a hole about as deep as the pot the plant came in and about twice as wide. You want the top of the root ball sitting level with the surrounding soil, not buried deeper, not sticking up higher. Mix a handful of compost and a scoop of starter fertilizer into the soil you dug out. Set the plant in, fill around it with that amended soil, and press it down gently with your hands. Water it thoroughly right away. Then add 2 to 3 inches of mulch around the plant, keeping the mulch a couple of inches away from the stem. Mulch piled against the stem traps moisture and can cause rot. which is one of those mistakes that doesn't show up until the plant suddenly collapses weeks later. Mulch is your best friend for reducing work in the garden. It holds moisture in the soil so you water less. It keeps the soil cooler in summer heat. And it blocks sunlight from reaching weed seeds, which means far fewer weeds to pull. I use shredded hardwood mulch in most of my beds. It breaks down slowly, looks tidy, and it's cheap. A couple of inches is all you need. I refresh it once a year, usually in late spring. For someone on a fixed income, a few bags of mulch from the garden center is one of the best investments you can make. Some municipalities even offer free mulch if you're willing to haul it yourself. There's an old saying about perennials: the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. There's some truth to this, especially with larger plants and shrubs. That first season, most of the growth is happening underground, where you can't see it. The plant is building the root system it needs to support years of growth. So if your new perennials look a bit underwhelming that first summer, don't panic and don't rip them out. Give them time. By year 2, you'll see more foliage, and by year 3, many of them will be blooming and spreading the way you imagined. I will say this though, in my experience, well-planted perennials in good soil with proper watering often look better in year 1 than people expect. I've planted beds that looked respectably full by September of the first year. It depends on the plant, the conditions, and how you care for them. The sleep, creep, leap rule is more of a general caution than a law. Don't let it discourage you. For those of you starting your first flower garden at 60 or 70 or beyond, I want to share 2 things that have made gardening sustainable for me as I've gotten older. The first is raised beds. Even a bed raised 12 inches off the ground makes a dramatic difference in how much bending and kneeling you have to do. You can build simple ones from cedar boards, or buy pre-made kits from the garden center for $40 to $80. I converted most of my annual beds to raised beds about 10 years ago, and my back has never been happier. The second is to start small. I know the temptation to plant an enormous cottage garden in one weekend. I've been there. But a 4 by 8 foot bed with 5 or 6 well-chosen plants is more than enough to give you a beautiful first garden, and it won't leave you so sore and tired that you dread going back out to maintain it. You can always expand next year once you know what works. I'd rather you have one small bed that thrives than a big ambitious one that overwhelms you by July. A final thought before you head out to start planning. Keep a garden notebook. It doesn't have to be fancy. A $1 composition book from the drugstore works fine. Write down what you planted, where you planted it, and when. Note when things bloom. Note what did well and what struggled. Note the first frost date in fall and the last frost in spring. After even one season of notes, you'll have information specific to your garden that no book, no video, and no garden center employee can give you. My garden notebook is 40-some years thick now, and it's the most useful gardening tool I own. Here's what I want you to do today. Walk outside, pick the spot where you want your first flower bed, and do the sun check and the soil squeeze test I described. Write down what you find. That's your starting point. From there, you can look up your zone, browse some plants online that fit your conditions, and make a list before you ever spend $1. One step at a time, one bed at a time, one season at a time. That's how every good garden begins.